Okay, so we are way down here, module 11. We're doing variance analysis, direct materials, and direct labor. Now, these are hopefully going to be a review for you. All the quizzes are now available in the modules, so we have our quiz for this week available. I think I made it available on Friday or Thursday of last week. That's what I did for spring break. You're welcome. I will take repayment in forms of, to make the joke again, performance evaluations. Yeah, that's the joke. Okay, we have our next week. We're going to continue with variance analysis with a slightly different set of them: mix and yield variances and overhead variances. So between this week, DM and DL, and next week, overhead, we have our three typical product cost types of variances. And then here we have mix and yield, which is a little slightly different way of specifically looking at quantity variances. You break it up into mix and yield. Then we're going to jump into Chapter 8 and Chapter 10. This is the first semester I've tried Chapter 8 in 1 week, that I recall anyway, and Chapter 10 in 1 week. But I really do think the material works fine. I have cut out some of the material in each of those. So I think they'll work fine as just 1 week, quick chapters we'll review. And then after that, we've got our final exam review, which the quiz is not available yet. That says it's not available to you yet. And the final exam, again, it's not available to you yet. Those will be available soon. That number is probably off. Don't if that disagrees with the syllabus, trust the syllabus. That's should be 200. Okay, yeah. Don't freak out. It said 350. That's when I get it fixed and published, it'll be at the appropriate 200. Okay, so let's right here. Same chapter 7 either way, I guess. So let's go back to what we talked about. So you're being a bit of a scientist in your firm by doing variance analysis, and you can do variance analysis on all sorts of things. We're going to do some very prototypical, I almost said alchemical, that's not quite right. Archetypal is, I think, the word I wanted. Just the traditional ways you always see variance analysis when a company does variance analysis. Because every company has DM and DL and overhead if they are in manufacturing or producing some sort of product. And so a very easy way to do that is figure out, well, how much of this input is costing us, and how is that varied? So quantity variance. And how much is it costing us per unit, and how much is that varied? And figure out those variances to figure out ways in which we can either be more efficient with it or get better priced inputs. But you can do it with anything. You just need a list of the inputs that go into the expectation. So, for example, here we have 3 inputs that create 3 variances. We have the volume. I'll write it bigger since it doesn't show up very well in the video. It's small. We have the volume of finished goods. When we're budgeting, so when I say you need a list of things that go into the expectation, or saying what I'm saying is, if you were budgeting for how much direct materials you need, how much direct labor you need, how much overhead you need to pay for in the coming period, or again something odd, something unusual, how much of this specific kind of, I'm torn between a couple different examples to use, but the specific kind of material or specific type of capacity on the mileage on the roads. Say you're a trucking company, how much of this specific mileage on the road do we need? How many hours on the road, or whatever. You're going to break it down into what are the constituent elements that would make me have a prediction of that. And then each of those needs to be one lever at a time. They'll lead each one of those to a different variance. So we have 3 things. You have how many are we producing? In our traditional example, we have 3 things leading to 3 variances. And I'm going to break that out and make it a more unusual example. We have our volume, which leads to volume variance. So how many units are we producing? We have quantity of input. Let's say direct materials or direct labor input, and that leads to our quantity variance. The names are really, really imaginative, I know, but it's good. They're very simple. And then we have, the price per direct materials and direct labor unit. And so that, of course, leads to the price variance. But the point is that these 3 right here, if you were trying to budget for direct materials or direct labor for the coming year, you would need to know those 3 things, or you could not create a budgeted number. You could not create an expectation of, we're going to spend $20,000 on direct labor next year. Well, how do you know that? Well, because I think we're going to produce 1,000 units and we're going to need 20 units of labor or whatever, 2 units of direct labor hours per unit at $10 an hour. And so those three together give us the 20,000 if I've done the math in my head correctly with that. So, for example, let's say you're a trucking company and you're trying to figure out, well, we want to budget capacity. We want to figure out the variances of our capacity. And so we need to have a variety of things that we put into if we were budgeting out our trucking capacity over the next period. Number of trucks. We have a space in the trucks. So maybe the average capacity per truck. Maybe we need to know something about, those are good. We need to know about laws. What I'm saying is time on road, which is dictated by the law sometimes. So yeah, we're trying to figure out how much capacity we're going to be able to bring to bear in the next coming month to move things around as a trucking company. We need to know the number of trucks we have, how much space we have in those trucks, what size of the trucks. Are they just single long 53 footers? Are they the double or triple stacks you can get in some states or are allowed in some states? And how much time are we legally allowed to put on each of those cubic feet on the road? So if I were a trucking company trying to figure out how well I did in a period, I'm likely to break it down and get a variance off of each of these, because I'm going to be able to say, well, we had our budget, our estimated number of trucks versus our actual number of trucks, and hold everything else constant, and that will produce a certain amount of capacity variance there. Truck number capacity variance. I'm going to name it really dumb. Truck number capacity variance. And then, we thought we'd have a certain size of truck. That was our expected amount. And we actually had, on average, a different size of truck. Okay, so now we have space variance. And, the law suddenly changed in Wyoming, which we traveled through quite a bit for our road. So we expected a certain number of hours available on the road for each truck and each cubic foot on the truck. And instead we had a different number of hours allowed on the road. And so we have our time on road variance. And you can see what the difference is due to each of these factors. So we're doing something that is very dry in how we do it, and very the same. When you apply it in a company that has specific needs, you can use all these principles the same, just adapted to those specific needs. Now, so let's get to the vanilla we're going to be doing for the next, today and Wednesday, and for the quiz for Friday. So we have our three variances: volume variance, quantity variance, and price variance. Let's go down to direct labor. All right. So we're also going to talk about how we fit these into an accounting system, because the firm likes to have this as automated as possible. It doesn't want to employ a bunch of people who are just going to have to do all these formulas over and over and over again and figure it out. No, let's let the accounting system do as much of the work as possible. And so we have direct labor. So these are laborers who have spent time on our product. So how much we're paying them and how long they worked to produce the products are the two that we're most critically interested in. And how long they work is the quantity variance. So here we have the actual hours they worked. Now let me go down this one. I like this one, because in the parentheses is always the one lever you're pulling, the one thing you're comparing for actual versus budgeted, which is what you're going to pull the name of the variance out of, and it's what is really being compared here. So we have actual quantity minus budgeted quantity, or standard quantity. So standard, budgeted, expected, all three of those are going to be synonymous throughout this chapter. I think in the textbook, I've thought over the years of fixing it and making it all synonymous, and actually I think it's a benefit that I use them a variety of different terms here, because they do mean the same thing in this context, where we're getting at the same idea. So yeah, we have AQ, actual quantity, minus SQ, standard quantity or budgeted quantity here, and that difference there times the budgeted price or standard price, SP. All right, so we're trying to figure out, given given how many direct labor hours or the quantity we should have used, our standard quantity, given actual production, how well did we did? How well did we did? Yeah, that's great. How well did we do? So here we are right here. Full actuals, always static budget. And we're focused on here. So we have the budgeted amount, but it's at actual volume, meaning finished goods units. So given how many finished goods units we actually produced, we should have used this number of hours to produce them. That's our standard quantity, which is right here. SQ times SP is this figure right here. Actual quantity, so the one lever we're pulling here is quantity because it's quantity variance. Actual quantity times standard price is right here. So did we go above that? Did we use more than we should have given how many finished goods units we produced? And it's all gauged at the standard price. We don't go to price till the very, very end. We're moving from most fictitious all the way to most actual and real. And so we have our variance here. Great. Some various reasons. You might have poor training. We took longer because we have poor training. We have poor retention, which of course leads to less skill per employee because you have people who are shorter in their tenure on average because you have to keep the turnover going, keep the churn going. Keep replacing the people is what I'm trying to say. Also, you could have there's a possibility you have low quality materials that are leading to extra work. They have to, they keep breaking on the factory floor. They keep gumming up the machinery or whatever. So you have excessive rework due to low quality materials. So you have now, once you get this variance, the right number to ask the right person follow-up questions and drill down to exactly what the cause is of this variance and then root it out. All right, price variance right here. We're holding constant, so I can write out our different figures here. We're holding constant our actual quantity because we moved from fictitious quantity to actual quantity here through the quantity variance. And now we have actual quantity held constant. We're going to move from fictitious price up to actual price right here. So the two things being compared are AP minus SP in the parentheses, all times the actual quantity of hours. Okay, well, yeah, we use a certain number of hours and we're going to keep that constant in this, but how much do we pay for those hours? We expect to pay this amount. Did we pay more than that? Did we pay less than that? All right, so here's how we record it. A few little rules of thumb that are in the textbook here. One, I'm going to number them maybe different than they have there. Variances are considered expense accounts. Okay, when you're doing a standard costing system in your company, which means you're going to change your accounting system so that it reflects quite literally the variances and collects them automatically, to a degree at least, you create these variance accounts, which are expense accounts. Two, WIP is at full standard. Okay? That's the whole idea. So when you have a certain number of WIP, work in production, on the factory floor, you are going, if you have a standard costing system, you are valuing them in your accounting records as if they cost you the standard quantity to make, to produce as far as they've been produced, and the standard price for each of those inputs. It doesn't matter if there's been an explosion in the factory. Maybe that's a little extreme, but the idea is it doesn't matter if you've gone up or down or what the variances are. You've carved those pieces off into separate expense accounts. WIP, that debited amount is at the standard amount, the standard quantity and price for those. So it's at this right here. Standard quantity times standard price. And you peel off one expense account right here to one account. And you peel off the rest right here. And then you also have to have a separate part of the journal entry right here, which is the actuals. So 3, well, I'll phrase it differently. The payable is at full actuals. I don't usually say full actuals, but just keep it parallel. So the journal entry for direct labor variance is going to have 4 lines to it. We have a debit in the end to work in process. We debited a certain amount at standard here to work in process. We're going to be debiting or crediting a quantity variance, debiting or crediting a price variance, and between those 2 debits and credits, the net of that is going to get us to balance against the actual cost, which is our credit to the payable. Okay, don't flip these around, and don't debit actual to work in process and debit the payable at standard. You know who really frowns on you doing that? The government. Always record what you owe at the actual amount you owe. That mistake is called jail time. So the payable is always at the actual amount you owe. Well, yeah, we owe our workers this amount. Oh, I bet we better put the journal entry at that amount. Sure. So yeah, keep that as in the back of your head. So when you're doing the problems, some of the problems will have it wrong. Well, the payable, the credit to the payable has to be at the actual amount we owe the workers. The wage is payable. Now, I guess if you paid a cash, you could be crediting cash. So the account, I guess, could theoretically change from a payable to a cash or whatever. But we'll just always use payable. I'm pretty sure all the questions use wages payable. And that's the actual amount. Okay, so the last one, which is going to factor into those 2, is that because variances are, it's more like an add-on to this one right here. So which means if they're expense accounts, that means they go up with a debit. And that means unfavorable is going up. So an unfavorable variance is a higher debit to an expense account due to this variance expense account. So when I calculate out my price variance up here, for example, and I paid $15 per hour and I expected to pay $10 per hour, that $5 difference there, positive 5 inside the parentheses there, times 100 hours, let's say. So $500 of direct labor price variance, that's a $500 debit to my price variance account, my direct labor price variance account. Okay, and that helps us. That's great. So that's a $500 debit. Let's just say this is 0, for example. That's a $500 debit. Okay, and because I paid more than I expected to. This credit over here is $500 higher than my standard over here. So it balances as a result of that. Makes sense how that works out? I can put actual numbers in here. We'll have questions that put actual numbers in here. Let's move on from that. All right, and there are examples here too as well. Let's just move on. Oh, there's my joke. See, look, I'm not very original. I have some of the good jokes have gone through many focus groups and testing over the years here. Okay, yeah, and then the quantity variance. Similarly, if it's an unfavorable variance, it's a debit to the direct labor quantity variance account. So here in this example, we have actual wages of $11,500, and yet when it happens, we're going to do a wage expense, $11,500, and credit wages payable, $11,500. And here I've used wages expense as a pass-through for this. That doesn't happen in the question so much, but this is just standing in for the payable. We're debiting WIP at our standard amount, $8,000, which comes up right here. Debit WIP, $8,000. That's the standard in this example. Crediting actual at the actual amount, $11,500. And then our 2 variances here of $1,500 for direct labor price variance and $2,000. There's a typo right there. Look at that. And $2,000 for direct labor quantity variance. So you have this 4-line entry, usually saying wages payable as the credit at the bottom. And these can be either debits or credits, depending on whether they're favorable or unfavorable. Let me make a note to fix that one typo. Great. So you'll have these questions. For example, I'm pretty sure there's a question in the test bank that asks you, if you have the full standard amount for direct labor, and you have the actual amount for direct labor, these numbers right here, do you have enough information to make the journal entry? And do you think you do? If I told you just without any information here, well, we have $8,000 up here, we have $11,500 over here, can you know for sure what those two middle lines are? Yes, exactly. Yeah, we know total they got to be $3,500 debit to make the whole thing balance. But this could be like $10,000 credit, and this could be $13,500 debit. And the net of that is a $3,500 debit. It could be any range of numbers. So yeah, because it all happens at once, the 4-line entry here, it's you can't quite tease out for sure what the quantity variance is if you just know the top and the bottom amount, which is nice and easy. Honestly, the top and the bottom one indeed are the easier ones to calculate. Well, I know what the standard quantity, standard price is for 100 finished goods units, so I can multiply that real quick and know what we actually owe, so that's the actual amount right there. Whereas these two require, I got to hold this constant, and actually I'm only moving this lever, and so on and so forth. They're a little harder to calculate, at least a couple more steps. So it's not a crazy thing to do, to think you might encounter, and the test questions do it as well. All right, so for direct materials, just getting through it real quick so we can get to some questions. For the direct materials variances, you have the same quantity and price variance. The thing is that there's a warehouse in which you can keep direct materials. So you often buy direct materials on a different schedule than you use them, because you buy them one day, so you have them available for use upcoming week or whatever. And sometimes that day you buy is one day, and the next day is the end of the month. And so, hey, you purchased in 1 month, and at the end of the month you got to figure out the numbers. You haven't used it yet. So the point is that you'll have a certain number that you use and a certain number that you purchase, and those very rarely line up. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but they usually don't. That's different from direct labor. With direct labor, if you buy the labor in one period and stick it in a warehouse, that's called kidnapping. That's the best joke of the class. So, I'll see myself out. It's a dumb joke, but hopefully it helps you remember you can do it all at once. You have to do it all at once, for direct labor. When you buy a person's time, you have used that person's time. That's how it works. Whereas when you buy a good, you stick it in the warehouse and it sits there, which you couldn't do for a person. You can't just stick it in the warehouse. And there's I did it right there. It's not possible in most or legal in most states. And so what you have is actual quantity used, AQU, versus AQP, actual quantity purchased. Those are two actual quantities. So usually when you have a test question, you're going to want to set up, I know for sure I'm going to need, or I might need these for sure. I want to make sure I'm doing this with the flexible budget, etc. Actual quantity, actual price, standard quantity, standard price. I'm going to need those four because with those four, I can figure out this number and this number and this number, and therefore the differences between those numbers. Those are the four variables of interest, and I can figure out all of the traditional variances that way. What we're saying with direct materials is actually we have AQU and AQP. And we use AQU up here. There we are. Oh, I got to build a whole new thing. I forgot. So we have full actuals. We have what I call the quasi-budget. And actual quantity purchased times actual price is our full actuals. That's the amount we actually paid to buy what we bought this week, this month, whatever it is. And here we have actual quantity purchased times standard price, because we're trying to get a price variance out of this. You can't vary the actual quantity number you're using. Keep that constant. You're pulling the lever on this price thing. So actual quantity purchased here, actual quantity purchased here. Now you build a second quasi-budget, which uses actual quantity used times standard price. So those two numbers are not going to line up if you don't use and purchase the same amount in the period. To get your quantity variance. And then you get the flexible budget right here. You get EQU right here. So when you're talking about the quantity, sometimes called the usage variance, use actual quantity used. The U in there. Usage or quantity variances. I always call it quantity variance, but some people call it usage variance. You use the actual quantity used. When you're getting the price variance, also starts with P, so there's a lot of alliteration in this mnemonic here. You use the actual quantity purchased number. So you will have questions which give you both numbers and tempt you to use the wrong one to calculate your price or your quantity variance. Now here's the, some of you will be interested in this, some of you will not. I don't know who. With direct labor, we had a very, very nice system. It all worked out well. It had to. We have all these 4 points that have to balance in one journal entry. And so the difference between actuals and the flexible budget, so the difference between these two literally had to be the sum of these two right here. Nice, and everything worked perfectly. Over here, this and this don't match up, or they often don't. Actual quantity purchased and actual quantity used often don't match up. And so there's no guarantee that actuals minus flexible budget equals the sum of your quantity and price variance. You're like, well, I don't like that. And I don't mind if you don't like that. I get it. It doesn't seem nearly as cool. And it makes you think, well, that must be a mistake too. Somewhere that money's disappearing. It's not. I promise you. It's going in my pocket. No. Instead, where it's going, not my pocket, is in the value of the direct materials account going up or down by a certain debit or credit amount. So it's the movement of the direct materials or raw materials or warehouse, whatever account, going up and down that is the difference there. Which makes sense, because that's the difference between actual quantity purchased and used is, we went up in the warehouse by 10 units because we bought 10 more than we used. So the value of that is the difference there. And once you add that in, price plus change in direct materials account plus quantity variance, now it equals the full difference. Now you know where all the money went. All right, that was a little tangent there about this piece here. But some of you will be like, oh, it looks so nice. And you'll use that as a check figure. You'll say, well, these two sum to the difference of there, so I must have everything. I must have figured it all out. It's a good check figure for me. And you'll do that with direct materials, and it'll break your brain. Unless you realize, there is a gap in here that might come from a movement in direct materials or raw materials. The same equations here for direct materials, price variance, just with the added point of I had like two sentences I merged together. We have the same equations in direct materials as we had in direct labor, except like I said, we have two AQs, two actual quantities. So let's move on down to the journal entries. So as a result of this, we actually have an easier time filling in gaps with the direct materials journal entries because they're often recorded separately and they're 3-line entries. Now, if you know the top and you know the bottom of the journal entry, can you guess the middle? Now you can. Yes, now we know for sure it has to be this amount right here. So if I told you we have a debit to direct materials of $800, we have a credit to accounts payable of $1,000, you know for sure there has to be a $200 debit to whatever that variance account is in the middle. And so let's talk about what the variance accounts are and what we're doing. So this direct materials account is the price of direct materials in the warehouse. And we're debiting to it $800 because we added $800 worth of direct materials there. That's at the quasi-budget amount. So WIP, when we get to WIP, we're at full actuals. And usually we go like this. We go raw materials or direct materials account to WIP account to finished goods account course, to cost of goods sold account. And so if WIP is at full actuals, we record the direct materials account if we're using standard costing, most standard costing systems anyway. We are going to record that as at like half standard at the quasi budget here. Standard price, but actual quantity in there. Okay, so this entry right there is actuals, price variance, and quasi budget amount. So those 10 ounces of rare earth metal that we purchased in this example are being valued either at actual amount, we paid $1,000 for them, that's the payable, you got to record the payable at what you actually owe, or sale time, right? A $200 variance, because that $1,000 is $200 more than we expected given our standard price. And then, at the standard price, that actual 10 ounces, actual quantity of 10 ounces would be worth $800. So our direct material is at quasi budget, so that WIP is at full standard. Now, it's possible some of you have noticed what that means for finished goods accounts and cost of goods sold accounts when you're in standard costing system. Are they at the actual amount you spent on cost of goods sold? Let's say, for example, they wouldn't be. You've partialed out all of the variances before you got to WIP. Finished goods is downstream of WIP, so it's going to be valued also at full standard. And cost of goods sold is downstream of finished goods, so it's also at full standard. And so profit, not that. Google thinks it's so smart. Stop it. So here is what your income statement looks like at full when you're using a standard costing system. All this looks normal. And the point is that the variances, let's reorganize it, but the variances are an operating expense. Variance A, B, C, D, they're all an operating expense. Well, that was us deviating from what we usually do. Cost of goods sold up here is at full standard. So that's what we would expect to pay for those 10 ounces of rare earth metals. It's reflected in that. All our expectations are reflected in that. The variances come out here. Well, we varied from what we expected, but we're going to consider that an operating expense. They get pulled out and set aside, and they get put down there. Yeah, that makes a little more sense. And then, obviously, the net will be the same at the end. They are expenses that we're pulling out of what we did if we went over, for example. We're just changing where in the income statement it is. All right, so here's this example here with direct materials. We have our two entries. One when we buy. We have 10 ounces at $100 a piece for the accounts payable. That's at actual. And then we would have expected it to be 8 ounces that we bought. At $80. Our expectation was $80 for those 10 ounces. So actual quantity purchase of 10 times standard price of 80 gives us $800. And the $200 difference there could either be figured by doing the equation of 100 minus 80 equals 20. That's actual price minus standard price. Inside the parentheses is 20 times actual quantity purchase, which was 10. So 20 times 10 gives us 200, and that's the same as this right here, this amount right here. So 200 was a positive number when we did the equation. That's unfavorable. It's a debit, also unfavorable. Those are good things for you to remember for questions because it just helps you check to make sure you know what the favorability is of your answer. Good number of the questions test you on. They'll have the same answer in favorable and unfavorable. You got to know which one you're talking about. I usually don't use the numbers, the sign of the numbers, excuse me. I usually don't use the sign of the numbers to determine favorability, but plenty of people have success memorizing it. Oh, a positive sign, that's an unfavorable variance. I usually think through, well, what actually happened What's the more actual number versus what the expectation was? And we're talking about cost, so if the actual number was higher, that's unfavorable. I usually leave myself the breadcrumbs to kind of re-engineer it every time I do it, because some of these variances get a little wonky, and at least I don't trust myself to make sure I've done I flipped it if it needs to, or totally thought through how exactly it's worked out. All right, and then when we use, what's the example here? We use 6. 7 are put into production. 7 ounces of rare earth metal were put into production. And we would have expected, though, given how many units we produced, only to have used 6 ounces to produce those units. So we used like an extra ounce of rare earth metal. So this is our quantity variance entry here and also here. Debiting WIP at full standard, we would have expected to use 6 ounces to produce whatever number of finished goods materials we did, finished goods units we did, at $80 an ounce. So 6 times 80 is $480. At full standard, we are debiting work in process at $480 based on our expectations. We pull out the fact that we have 1 ounce more actual quantity used minus standard quantity is 7 minus 6. So we have 1 ounce extra times the standard price of $80 gives us 80 positive direct materials variance, which is going to be a debit because that's unfavorable. Variances are accounts are expenses. Various accounts are expenses, which go up with the debit. So unfavorable is debit is positive in all of these calculations. And we credit direct materials at the same. We credit it at quasi budget, just this quasi budget. We credit it at actual quantity used, which was 7 ounces times the standard price, which was $80 per ounce, gives us $560. We credit direct materials again at the kind of quasi budget, the half standard. All right. We're not going to go further in the chapter here because that's overhead variances. If you remember, that's for next week. And then if we go a little further down past overhead variances, we get to the mix and yield variances at 7.8. That's also next week. So let's talk about the quiz. Let's look at this quiz. Let's try some questions out. See how it goes. All right, so I want to give one disclaimer real quick. Similar to one of the chapters previous to the midterm, I worked over the test bank a considerable amount, and at least one of the chapters. And I gave a disclaimer saying, some of the questions have been less tested than others. So if there's a mistake in them, it's very possible there is a mistake, and I'll want to fix it. So keep an eye out. It's possible that after you've done it 10 times and you're still not getting it, and maybe there is a problem with the question. We can look at that. All right. So the way these open answer ones work on this chapter 7 quiz, almost all of them, I think all of them, is you don't worry about favorability or unfavorability. I just want a positive number. Even if you do the calculations, it comes out negative, I just want the positive number as if you were saying a favorable or unfavorable variance of this amount. That's how you report it. You don't report a negative number as a variance when you're saying it out loud, at least. It's not typical. And then I also have a note here saying to round only your final answer to the nearest cent. Some of them, there's no possibility to round earlier. Some of them, you do have a possibility to round earlier. I have this on all the open answer questions, this note. This is typical for what we've done throughout the semester. Canvas does not round to the very end. And so just let Excel or Google Excel on the test not round anything yet. Just because you get a good rate and you're like, oh, that should be cents. Yes, it should be cents, but let Excel carry all the digits it can to the final answer so that Canvas doesn't mark it off because you rounded too early. All right, so we're looking for the direct labor price variance. All right, well, I can figure that 2 ways. I can either say, well, direct labor price variance is actuals minus quasi-budget, or AQ times AP minus AQ times SP. That's the full equation. I can also have the algebraically rearranged equation, which says AP minus SP in the parentheses times AQ. Okay, I just pulled the AQ here. So I pulled the AQ here out and left AP minus SP inside the parentheses. That's all I did. I algebraically rearranged it, in case you're wondering that magic trick. So I want to know those. I need to know that. If you have AP, SP, and AQ, that's going to equal my direct labor price variance, DLPV. Also, a few of the questions do have some feedback listed. Sometimes it'll give you a little feedback if you got the answer wrong, I think specifically. There's just a few of them, and there's no order or rhyme to which ones I did. It was a project I had one semester that I didn't finish, and it's on the docket for future semesters to get more of those into the test banks. All right, so we need to know actual quantity, and I just happened to go over it. Look, actual direct labor. Well, we're talking about direct labor, so actual direct labor hours. We're talking about direct labor, then actual quantity is the number of hours people spend. Looks like we spent 22,566. All right, so this is our DL price variance open answer question, and AQ is 22,566. Actual price is right here. Okay, price, when you're talking about somebody's time, is often called a wage, synonymous. Be comfortable using those the same way. And or right there, standard price, right there. Did I copy it? I don't recall if I copied it. Do we need any more data points? Don't we have all three? That's all we need. All right. That's pretty cool. So we can, I'm going to do this 100 times. I know. I have to back up and get the parentheses going. AP minus SP, all times AQ. That should be our direct labor price variance. Oh, we got to get rid of the dollar sign. So we're going to follow the equations. These equations are going to remind you a little bit of the Equation Happy Chapter 3. I think there are fewer here, and they're like always the same. Chapter 3 had to do a little bit of decision about which equation to use. A little more of a decision. Okay, that's a very similar question. Yeah.
Is standard and budgeted the same thing?
Yes. Yes. And so, yes. I'm 90% sure. I'm 99% sure I can say yes. I mean, maybe I've randomly used it in some weird way.
Well, like in the book.
Yeah.
It would say like budgeted price or whatever in the formula, but then like although you've been saying standard size.
Yep. Yeah, the same. Yeah. Okay. This is a very similar question here, and I'm not going to bother with it. In fact, it's about the same. Let's move on to this. Oh, direct labor quantity variance. Okay. Oh, I also look. The professor's so nice. He highlighted something so you don't trip over it. Okay. So let's look at a direct labor quantity variance open answer question. All right, so direct labor quantity variance is AQ times SP minus SQ times SP. So if we algebraically rearrange that we're going to have in the parentheses the one lever we're pulling, the actual versus expected or budgeted or standard thing we're comparing, which in this case is quantity. So we need actual quantity minus standard quantity, all times standard price. We're going to pull the SP out and have left SQ minus AQ minus SQ, excuse me. Okay, and standard quantity here, we're talking about what the standard quantity would be at actual production, at actual volume, actual finished goods units used. My dumb story about the time machine. You're going to invent a time machine, spend hours and hours and hours, and sacrifice all the human relationships you could possibly have just because you want to build a time machine, and you call the crazy person by everybody around you to do it. And so you spend that time you have in the time machine to tell people what the actual volume was instead of what they expected the volume to be. So yeah, if you knew when you were budgeting, somebody came in the time machine and said, oh, actual volume, actual finished goods, you're going to produce 10,000 instead of 12,000. Yeah, that's the idea. All right, so we need those three. We need AQ, we need SQ, and we need SP. We can grab those, right? Well, we know. Remember SPs right here. We got that. Actual quantity. Okay, we got that. Standard quantity. Oh, that's a standard something. We should copy that, right? Nobody's going to step on the landmine? No? No, don't do that. Don't do that. That's the static budget. If you did that, you're subtracting this and this. So you're mixing the volume variance into the quantity variance. Now, there's a real reason why that's a problem. And the real reason why that's a problem is that people are slippery fish. So you call up your production manager and you're like, hey, you got this variance. You got this variance of $10,000. I saw it. I did the calculation myself. I took the standard quantity of the static budget and I subtracted it away from the quasi budget, and this is the amount. He's like, no, no, it's not me. Sorry, that's just because we did more business, higher volume. And like, oh, okay, I'll let you go. Slippery fish, yeah. Trying to escape responsibility. No, don't let him get away. Take out the volume variance. We're just saying you should have used this amount of direct labor hours, and you use this amount. It's on you. You got to pin him down. So don't do that. Don't mix up your volume. Don't mix in your volume variance into your quantity variance. So where's our static quantity variance at flexible budget? Which number do we copy over? Or do we have to do some math? We have to do some math, don't we? Okay. So if this is the amount on the standard budget, and this is our static budget's fixed goods units. All right, so let's label these. Actual price, standard price, actual quantity. And this is standard quantity static. And this is the volume expected on the static budget. That means that our standard quantity per unit has to be SQ static over volume static. You know, back in September, there was no time machine. We thought we were going to produce 11,912 units. We predicted that out. And so we said, well, that means that we're going to use 21,290 direct labor hours to produce those 11,912 units. So you divide those, and our expectation, somewhere on the spreadsheet, there was an expectation that each unit uses 1.787273338 direct labor hours. Down to the second. We got it down. But that's our expectation. Okay, so we need to, this is our standard quantity per unit. We need to take that number and make it look like what I had before, and multiply it by the actual production. This is the amount the time machine person is going to come back and say, no, it's not 11,912. It's 9,034. Oh, okay. Thanks, time machine man. There, that's the amount we'll budget instead of this. 16,000. Oh, that should be our direct labor budget. So that is our standard quantity at the flexible budget. So now we have A, B, and C that we need for our calculation. Right? Got our equation. AQ minus SQ all times the standard budget. No, standard price. So that should be our direct labor quantity variance. I'm pretty sure I won't say that. So we're making sure we only input a positive number, but it was positive already, which means it's an unfavorable variance. That makes sense. We expected to use this quantity of hours. We actually use this quantity of hours. Oh man, we're using way too many hours to produce 9,000 physical finished goods units. That's a lot of time people are spending. What are they doing all that whole time? $78,000 worth of time more than expected. we're going to call somebody up. And we didn't fall for the trap. We didn't use volume. We didn't use the standard quantity at the static budget, so we aren't mixing the volume variance in there. So now you can't slippery fish out of this. This is on you. 78,000 variance. What's up? How can we fix it? So that's our direct labor quantity variance. Great. Okay, good. There's you know what? Let's come back to that. We'll have a chance to go over some more questions on Wednesday. Let's look at some direct materials questions. All right, so here's a question that focuses in on the journal entry piece of the puzzle. All right, so ultimately we're asking which of the following debit/credit is part of the journal entry that records the firm's direct materials price variance. All right, so remember there are two entries. One when you purchase it, which records the price variance. One when you use it, materials that is, use a material, and that's for the quantity or usage variance. Okay, so we're talking about the first entry, and looks like we've got a debit, a credit, a debit of different amounts, all to the price variance. So it's saying there's a line in that entry. What is that line? So I'm asking you a twofold question. I want you to calculate out the direct materials price variance, and I want you to tell me if it's favorable or unfavorable, and I want you to be able to translate favorable or unfavorable into debit or credit. Those are the three pieces of knowledge you need to do this. Okay? Well, the first piece of knowledge, we can calculate our price variance. It's this minus that. AQP times AP minus AQP times SP. Or rearranged, AP minus SP, all times AQP. So we need AP, we need SP, we need AQP. So let's start with that. Let's figure out what those three are in the fact pattern. So the Super Dodgeball firm, as you might expect, produces dodgeballs for middle schools and high schools across the United States. The firm uses the patented foam polymer to give its dodgeballs a signature soft yet pride-destroying effect. On the first day, you can skip that part for the rest of your time with these questions because it doesn't give you anything. But it was fun to read one time. On the first day of the month, the firm purchased a large supply of this polymer, 1,000 units for $5,500. So, did it actually purchase that? Yeah. So that sounds like an actual quantity to me. And 5,500 is the actual amount, this box, which is AQP times AP. So AQP of 1,000 and AQP times AP equals 5,500. We can figure out what AP means. It is then, right? It has to be 5.5. It has to be that 5,500 divided by the 1,000. The actual price we paid is 5.5 per unit of polymer for 1,000 units, giving us 5,500 total for buying that. Okay, great. Let's put that in the question here. DM price variance dodgeball question. Okay, so we have 1,000 units. Whoop. Had an unlock on. I don't know why I turned off. 1,000 units, that's our actual quantity purchased. We have 5,500, that's total actual cost. And so 5,500 divided by that actual quantity purchased, that has to be our actual price. I wrote SP for some reason first. AP, that's our AP. Okay, we got two. We got two of the three. We need three. We need AP, we need SP, we need AQP. We got two of them. What's our standard price? Well, we just look here. The firm's standard price for the polymer is $4.75. I didn't even read these two sentences. I don't need them for this question. I got the three I need. SP, 4.75. Okay, now, before you do any calculations, do you think this is going to be a favorable or unfavorable variance? It's going to be unfavorable. Because look at that actual price, 5.5. Yeah. Do you want to pay more? Just generally in life? No, you don't. Okay, you're going to be like, yeah, but sure, professor, where's your Lambo? Okay, yes. More expensive things cost more. But I'm asking, you got two Lambos and they're the same thing. You want to pay $5 million for it or $1 million for it? Obviously, you want to pay less. They're the same Lambo. Yeah, that's what I'm asking. So yes, we have this 1,000 AQP, actual quantity of direct material purchased. We would prefer to pay $4.75 for that versus 5.5. So yeah, it's going to be unfavorable. This is not good. So we go through the calculation here. Just follow the equation. AP minus SP in parentheses times AQP, actual quantity purchased. Okay, so that is our direct materials price variance. So look, it's either A or C. It's either this debit here. Oh, can't see in the video. So this debit here or this credit here. And we know it's unfavorable. Both because it's a positive number, if you want to memorize the signs rules. For cost variances, positive numbers are unfavorable. And because we could see very, very easily, yeah, well, look, actual price was higher than standard price. So yeah, that's unfavorable. Okay, so what does that mean? Is unfavorable a debit or a credit? I think I heard it. Debit. Yeah. Remember, variance accounts are expense accounts. Expense accounts go up with a debit. More expenses are worse than less expenses. Business rule. So it's this one. Unfavorable 750 means that the part of the journal entry recording purchasing this direct material that is going to direct materials price variance is going to be a debit of 750. That line in the entry. Great. Let's do the quantity variance question. Let's go on down to direct materials quantity variance question. Okay, so here is one of the oddball questions that I have in here, just to make it a little varied. So you have to do a little bit of algebra. Unless this is the one where you can't determine it. You know, I have some of those. But let's go ahead and go through and see if it is. All right, so first of all, it's asking what is the actual quantity of the direct materials used. It's saying what's AQU? You mean I don't give it to you? No, I don't give you AQU. I must not give you AQU in this question because it's asking for it at the end. Hint, think about the formula for direct materials price quantity variance. I read it wrong. All right, so this is a DM quant variance formula magic algebra thing. So what is the equation? We have, direct materials quantity variance. It's over here. AQU times SP minus, wherever the thing went. I think my green's up there. Minus SQ times SP. So the quasi-budget minus flex budget. Or we could rearrange it, and we could have in the parentheses AQU, actual quantity used, minus standard quantity, all times standard price. And if we have or can figure out all three of those, then we should be able to solve the problem. So let's check real quick. I forgot. The full equation has equa in it, means there's an equal sign, equals the DMQV, direct materials quantity variance. Okay, sorry. So of those four, we need at least three. Of those four, we need three, and then we can solve for the last one. So I'm asking you, what's AQU? And if I've given you the other three, you can solve for the last one. If I only give you two of them, then you can't. You would pick A. Cannot be determined from this. Okay, let's see. We have standard quantity for the actual. We have total finished goods produced, so actual volume, great. We have our standard quantity per unit, per finished goods unit of 10 pounds per finished goods unit, and we have our standard price. Okay, so we've got our standard price. We have what we need to calculate the standard quantity at actual volume. 10 pounds per finished goods unit, 10,000 finished goods units actually produced means 100,000 is our standard quantity. We have two of the three. And, look, an unfavorable direct materials quantity variance of 18,750. So, look, I gave you that number right there. So, do we have three of the four? Yeah, we can do this. Let me write out in the sheet here what I wrote out earlier. So, AQU minus SQ times SP equals direct materials quant variance. Okay, great. We have SP of $3 per pound. We have standard quantity, and that equals 10,000 finished goods units times 10, the standard quantity of 10 units per 10 direct materials units per, or allowed is the phrasing here, per finished goods unit. Yes.
In your equation, it's supposed to be AQ minus SQ minus B.
Ah, thank you. Yes. Here we go. Yeah, sorry, the keys are right next to each other. Sorry, I just saw that they literally on the opposite sides of the keyboard, so it's not. I can't use that excuse. All right. So, and our direct materials quantity variance is an unfavorable 18,750, which means positive. Positive it's going to be. Okay. Great. So what we can do then is we can say, all right, 18,750 equals 3 times whatever in the parentheses. So first, let's start by dividing by 3 on both sides of the equation. And so now what we have is AQU minus 100K equals, let me get rid of the parentheses too, equals that. It should be, it's this 100,000, which is the 10,000 finished goods units times the 10 direct materials units allowed per finished goods unit. So we've got our standard quantity per unit, that's the 10, and the standard quantity total. When I have SQ up here and all these equations up here, it's SQ total. But that SQ total is built off of the expectation of how many per unit SQs there are. What's the standard quantity per unit? All right, so that's our equation now, and I did it with the old concatenate trick here. AQU minus 100,000 equals 6250, which is, we just divided both sides by 3. And so we can add 100,000 to both sides, and that should get us AQU. Everybody okay with the algebra there? Is that okay? It's a little easier to do on the board, but you know, I won't have record of it for later. So is that one of the there we go. We're good. That's our actual quantity used, 106,250. We can do a little gut check, just real quick. Oh, look, that is definitely unfavorable. We use way more pounds than we would expect it to. Given 10 pounds per unit and 10,000 units produced, we would have expected 100,000 units of direct materials to be used, 100,000 pounds. We use more than that. Some's falling off the truck. We have people who are maybe some workers who are inefficient with it. Maybe our machinery is old, needs to be maintained. It's chewing up the raw materials. Variety of things. Maybe we're using really low quality direct materials, so more of it gets lost in the process. Deteriorates in the process, or takes more of it to produce a finished goods unit than we expected. So we got a variety of follow-ups we can do.
I know you said that sometimes it rarely happens where it is the exact amount expected than what it actually was.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any questions that they're saying?
I don't think so.
So I mean,
it might be possible on the open answer, but I think I programmed them all so that there will be a difference.
So if I'm reading the question and I just see, all I see is that it's unfavorable, and I know it's 100,000, I just see the 10,000 by 10. Can I just skip all the problem and just be like, oh, I know it's 106,000.
You're too smart for this. No, that's just right. Yeah, okay. You could do that. That's the limitation of the multiple choice question format here I've used. Yeah.
3 seconds and you're like, oh yeah, 100,000
yep.
unfavorable.
Yep. If I'm okay with that being the strategy you use for this question, because you listed off like 2 or 3 things you have to know to be able to be confident about that answer. Those are 2 or 3 things that are part of the learning objectives for this chapter here, which is good. That's fine. Yeah, using your logic and what you know, I'm very comfortable with this. I know it. It has to be that 106,000. Lucian, was that similar what you're asking or something else?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. It's unfavorable. I know that 10,000 times 10 is going to be 100,000, so there's only one unfavorable one there. Yeah. Now I'm going to have to go back and check the one I say cannot be determined, because there's an alternative strategy. I got 2 homework assignments for myself. Fix the textbook question and or 1 or 2, whatever. How many questions I just said cannot be determined? Check alternate strategy. Sorry, go ahead, Jack.
So we know it's unfavorable if it's if it's more actual than expected and favorable if it's the other way around?
Mhm.
Is there any term if it's the same?
No, just no variance, zero variance. Yeah. All right, I want to stop there. I know why I started a new question with 5 minutes ago. Thank you very much.